I never imagined my life would unravel like this, scraping by just to keep four walls around me. At 24, I dreamed of traveling the world, photographing forgotten corners, building a portfolio that meant something. Instead, I perched on the threadbare futon of my cramped one-room walk-up, staring at a pile of overdue bills fanned across the milk crate I used as a table, each envelope a small accusation. The eviction notice sat on top. Final demand, stamped in crimson like a brand. My pulse stuttered when I checked my phone again. Nothing. No callbacks from the 47 freelance pitches I'd fired off. My bank balance blinked 11:43, enough for instant noodles, not rent. The city churned on outside my window, indifferent. If you slipped, it didn't pause. It simply rolled over you. Ms. Elena, my landlady, had left 3 voicemails. The last one was ice. Friday, Mia, no check, no key. I've got a waiting list. My ribs squeezed. I couldn't crawl back to my sister in Ohio. She was drowning in medical debt herself. Pride or stupidity kept me from begging. I was alone, cornered by my own bad luck. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, heavy, deliberate. They stopped outside my door. A knock, 3 measured raps. I knew who it was before I even stood. I opened the door. Ms. Elena filled the frame, tall, late 40s charcoal blazer cut sharp as a blade, silver-streaked black hair twisted into a knot that looked weaponized. She carried the scent of cedar and authority. Her eyes, the color of wet slate, swept the room. Takeout containers, camera gear and hawk bags, laundry avalanche, and settled back on me. "Evening, Mia," she said, voice smooth as oiled leather. "May I?" I stepped aside. She entered like she already owned the air I breathed. "You know why I'm here." I swallowed. "The rent. I'm working on it." "Working isn't wiring." She flicked a manicured nail against the eviction notice. "I run a business, not a hostel. I just need until Monday. Monday is a fantasy." Her gaze pinned me. "You're bright, resourceful. Desperation sharpens invention, doesn't it?" The room shrank. "What are you asking?" A slow smile, more calculation than warmth. "There's currency besides dollars." Heat flooded my face. You're not what?" She stepped closer. The cedar scent sharpened. "Proud?" "Broke people can't afford pride." My knees buckled. I gripped the futon frame. "I need to think. Think fast." She turned, heels clicking. At the door, she paused. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office. Bring whatever dignity you can spare." The door shut with a soft, final click. I sank to the floor, eviction notice fluttering down like a white flag. I tried every escape hatch, selling my last lens, already gone, calling ghosted clients, even drafting a GoFundMe I deleted in shame. Nothing. By midnight, I was hollow, the kind of tired that hums behind the eyes. I opened Elena's contact, polite reminders escalating to clipped threats. My thumb trembled over the cursor. "Can we talk?" I hit send before cowardice could snatch it back. The reply was instant. 9 a.m. Don't be late. Sleep was a fevered collage of locked doors and falling. I woke with grit in my mouth, dawn slicing through the blinds like judgment. I showered in water that never got hot, pulled on the least wrinkled blouse, and braided my hair with shaking fingers. "Just talk." I lied to the mirror. The building that housed Elena's office was pre-war brick, gargoyles leering from the cornice. Inside, the stairwell smelled of brass polish and old money. Her door was mahogany, brass plate. E. Valdez, Property Management. I knocked. "Come." She sat behind a desk the size of my entire apartment, surrounded by framed aerial shots of high-rises she probably owned. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city she ruled. She didn't look up from her laptop. "Sit," I obeyed. The chair was leather, cold. "Coffee?" "No, thank you." "Suit yourself." She closed the laptop, folded her hands. "Offer stands. 1 weekend. My penthouse. You entertain me fully and your debt resets to 0. Back rent, next 3 months gone." My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. "Define entertain." Her smile was small, surgical. Dinner, conversation, whatever follows if we're both inclined. No cameras, no contracts, no coercion beyond the math you already understand. I stared at the city glittering beyond the glass, towers winking like they knew my price. And if I say no? Friday 5 p.m., your belongings on the curb. I'll even throw in a cardboard box. Silence stretched, thick as tar. I thought of the futon, the cracked skylight, the way the radiator hissed like an accusation every night. I thought of my sister's last text. We're okay, promise. And knew it was a lie. One weekend, I whispered. Elena's eyes softened a fraction, almost human. Smart girl. She slid a keycard across the desk, black gloss, gold lettering. Saturday 7 p.m. Wear something that makes you feel dangerous. I took the card. It weighed nothing and everything. Friday crawled by in a haze of packing what little I couldn't bear to lose into a duffel. I left the eviction notice on the crate like a surrender flag. At 6:58 p.m. Saturday, I stood in the marble lobby of her building, pulse drumming in my ears. The elevator was mirrored. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Red dress borrowed from a friend who'd never ask why. Lips painted reckless. Penthouse button. The doors closed like a mouth. She opened the door herself, barefoot in a silk jumpsuit the color of midnight. Hair loose, waves brushing her collarbone. The apartment unfolded in acres of glass and walnut, city lights sprawling beneath us like spilled diamonds. Wine? She asked. I nodded. She poured something red and expensive. We drank on the terrace, wind tugging at my dress. Conversation started safe. Photography, architecture, the way light fractures off water. She listened like she collected details. When the bottle was half gone, she set her glass down. Bedrooms this way. No pretense left. I followed. The room was shadows and moon, bed vast as a continent. She kissed me first. Slow, deliberate, tasting of cherries and power. My nerves frayed, then snapped. I kissed back because refusal meant the street. Because her hands were steady when mine shook. Because somewhere between terror and hunger, I stopped pretending I hadn't already decided. Later, tangled in sheets that cost more than my rent, she traced a finger down my spine. 3 months, she murmured. Then we renegotiate. I stared at the ceiling, city glow painting constellations on plaster. I should have felt soiled. Instead, I felt the strange calm of a debt erased, a wolf fed. Sunday morning, she made espresso, strong and bitter. We didn't speak of what happened. We spoke of light meters and aperture like nothing had changed. When I left, she pressed the key card into my palm. Keep it. Just in case. Back in my apartment, the eviction notice was gone, replaced by a new lease 3 months prepaid taped to the door. I sat on the futon and cried, not from shame, but from the dizzy relief of gravity lifting. I still sent pitches. I still chased light, but some nights I found myself at her door, keycard warm in my fist, dress chosen like armor. The city kept spinning and I learned its secret. Everything has a price, and sometimes Yuli, sometimes you pay in skin. I sat on the edge of the worn leather chair in Ms. Elena's office. My fingers knotted so tightly in my lap that my knuckles blanched. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and old money, the kind of scent that clung to mahogany desks and leather-bound books. I couldn't look at her. Not yet. Thank you for seeing me, I murmured, barely audible. Of course, Sophia, she said, reclining in her high-backed chair like a queen on a throne. I always carve out time for my tenants. The word tenants landed with a velvet thud heavy with implication. She steepled her manicured fingers, the diamonds on her rings catching the low light. So what brings you here? I swallowed, tasting copper. The rent. I know I'm behind. I know you've been patient. Patience has its price. She cut in smoothly, her voice silk over steel. You understand that, don't you? I nodded, mute. She leaned forward, never breaking eye contact, her perfume, something dark and expensive, curling between us. I gave you an option, Sophia, and we both know why you're here. Heat flooded my face. I stared at the Persian rug, its intricate patterns blurring. I don't know if I can do it, I whispered. You can, she said, calm as a still pond. And you will, if you want to keep that little apartment of yours. Her words settled over me like a shroud. My hands shook as I gripped the chair's arms. Why me? I asked, voice cracking. Why are you doing this? Her expression softened, but it wasn't kindness. It was the look of a cat toying with a mouse. Because you need help, she said quietly. And I help those who need it. The words were layered, thick with subtext I couldn't parse. I didn't have the strength to challenge them. She reached across the desk, her hand pausing midair before retreating. Take your time, she said gently. But remember, time is a luxury you no longer possess. That night, back in my shoebox apartment, I replayed every syllable. Her voice echoed louder with each loop, a siren song I couldn't mute. The walls seemed to close in, the peeling paint and cracked ceiling a mockery of the life I'd tried to build. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, control, and the sickening realization that I had neither. I lay in bed, staring at the water stain shaped like a continent on the ceiling, trying to convince myself I still had a choice. That I could call my sister in Portland or sell the last of my jewelry or something. But the truth was a stone in my gut. I was out of moves. The eviction notice on the fridge glared at me like a dare. My phone buzzed with final notices, each vibration a nail in the coffin. The next day came too fast. I hadn't slept. The apartment was a tomb, every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the ancient fridge a reminder of how hollow everything had become. I couldn't eat, couldn't read, couldn't even lose myself in the romance novels I usually devoured. My mind was a hamster wheel, spinning around one thing, the meeting I'd agreed to with Ms. Elena. I told myself I could still back out. That maybe I could busk on the subway with my old guitar or crash on a coworker's couch or anything. But every escape route slammed shut the moment I considered it. My bank account was a negative number. My credit cards were maxed. My pride was a tattered flag. By late afternoon, I stood in front of the cracked mirror in my bathroom, trying to recognize the woman staring back. My hands trembled as I brushed my hair, the strands limp and dull. I chose a simple black dress, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed trying. It was armor, thin as tissue. I wasn't here to seduce. I was here to survive. The sun was bleeding gold across the skyline when I reached her building. It was all glass and steel, a monolith of wealth that made my tenement look like a cardboard box. The lobby smelled of marble and money. The elevator ride was endless, the muted strains of a piano concerto doing nothing to untie the knot in my stomach. At her door, I hesitated. My finger hovered over the bell. My heart was a trapped bird battering itself against my ribs. I could still run. What? Go back to an apartment that would be padlocked by morning? Sleep under a bridge with my duffel bag as a pillow? I pressed the bell. The chime was soft, almost polite. The door opened immediately. Ms. Elena stood there in a charcoal silk blouse, sleeves rolled to her elbows, her dark hair pulled into a sleek chignon. Her smile was small, practiced. Sophia, right on time. She stepped aside, and I crossed the threshold into a world of muted opulence, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city glittering like a spilled jewelry box, furniture that cost more than I'd made in a year. Drink? She asked, already pouring amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. I shook my head. No, thank you, she didn't insist. Just gestured to the dove-gray sofa. I perched on the edge, hands clasped so tightly my nails left crescents in my palms. She took the armchair opposite, crossing her legs with the grace of someone who'd never had to run for a bus. The silence stretched, thick with everything unsaid. I know this is hard, she said finally, her voice softer now, but you're not alone in this. The words felt rehearsed, like lines from a play she'd performed before. I looked away, toward the window, where the city lights were beginning to flicker on. I don't know if this is right, I whispered. It feels like the only thing left. She nodded, as if I'd confirmed a suspicion. Life rarely offers perfect choices, Sophia. Sometimes we take the ones that keep us breathing. I wasn't sure if she was comforting me or absolving herself. Either way, it didn't help. Sophia. Her tone sharpened, just enough to make me flinch. Look at me, I did. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, unreadable. You're resourceful, tenacious. I see someone fighting to survive, and there's no shame in that. I wanted to scream that this wasn't survival, it was surrender. But the words stuck in my throat. She rose and crossed the room with the fluid grace of a panther, settling beside me on the sofa. Her proximity was a violation, her perfume enveloping me like a net. Just breathe, she murmured. You're here now. You don't have to carry this alone. Her hand brushed my shoulder, light as a spider's touch. I froze, every muscle locked, torn between bolting and the terror of what waited outside these walls. This doesn't have to be difficult, she said, her voice a low purr. But it was. Everything in me screamed to flee, to claw my way out of this gilded cage. Yet I stayed, because the alternative was a void I couldn't face. As she leaned closer, the space between us shrinking to nothing, I closed my eyes. I tried to detach, to float above my body, to pretend this was happening to someone else. In the silence, the truth crystallized. This wasn't about choices anymore. It was about consequences, and I had already made mine. My name is Sam. The city of Port Haven never slept, but it always seemed to watch. Its rain-slicked streets reflected neon signs and the hurried footsteps of people chasing something: money, love, escape. I was one of them, though I wasn't sure what I was chasing anymore. My name is Sam Carter, 27, a barista by day, a dreamer by night, and a man drowning in debt by every waking hour. My tiny apartment in the East End was a shoebox with peeling paint and a radiator that clanked like it was auditioning for a horror movie. But it was mine, or at least it had been until the eviction notice arrived. The notice was taped to my door 3 weeks ago, a stark white sheet that might as well have been a death sentence. 2 months behind on rent, 1-800 owed. The landlord, Mr. Graves, wasn't the forgiving type. He'd already started leaving voicemails, his voice cold and clipped. Sam, you've got until the end of the month. No more excuses. I'd been picking up extra shifts at the Driftwood Cafe, slinging lattes and wiping down counters, but the tips barely covered groceries. Freelance graphic design gigs, my old passion, had dried up months ago. The city was eating me alive, and I was running out of ways to fight back. That's when Victor Lang entered my life. I'd seen him at the cafe before, a man in his late 40s, always impeccably dressed, always alone. He sat in the corner booth, nursing a black coffee and reading the financial section of the newspaper like it was a sacred text. His suits were tailored, his watch glinted under the cafe's dim lights, and his presence commanded the room without effort. He tipped well, always in crisp bills, and always with a smile that lingered a little too long. I'd caught him watching me once or twice, his gray eyes sharp and unreadable. I told myself it was nothing, just a regular with too much time on his hands. Then one rainy evening, as I was closing up, he approached me. The cafe was empty, the smell of espresso grounds heavy in the air. I was wiping down the counter when his voice cut through the quiet. Sam, isn't it? He said, leaning casually against the pastry case. His voice was smooth like whiskey over ice, but there was an edge to it that made my skin prickle. Yeah, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What's up, Mr. Lang? He chuckled, a low sound that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just Victor, please. I've been meaning to talk to you. You seem resourceful, always hustling, always moving. I admire that. I forced a smile, my grip tightening on the rag. Thanks, just doing what I can. He nodded, stepping closer. I know you're in a tough spot. Overheard you on the phone the other day, something about rent. My stomach dropped. I'd been arguing with Mr. Graves in the back room, thinking I was alone. I don't mean to pry, Victor continued, but I'm in a position to help. If you're interested, I should have shut it down right there, told him to mind his own business, and walked away. But the word help hooked me like a fish. What kind of help? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, slow and deliberate, and slid a business card across the counter. Meet me tomorrow, my place. 8 o'clock. We'll talk. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving the card behind like a promise or a trap. The next night, I stood outside his building, a glass and steel tower that loomed over the waterfront. The doorman eyed me like I was a smudge on the marble floor, but he let me in after checking Victor's guest list. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent, each floor ticking by like a countdown to something I couldn't name. When the doors opened, Victor was waiting. He wore a navy blazer, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and that same knowing smile. "Sam," he said, stepping aside. "Glad you came." I stepped into the apartment, my sneakers squeaking on the polished hardwood. The place was a fortress of wealth, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the harbor, modern art on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than I'd make in a year. It was beautiful, but it made me feel like an intruder, a speck of dust in a world I didn't belong to. "Drink?" Victor asked, closing the door with a soft click that echoed in my chest. "No thanks," I said, my voice unsteady. He gestured to a sleek leather couch, and I sat, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles went white. He took the armchair across from me, leaning back like a king surveying his court. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the city below. "I'll get to the point," he said finally, his tone casual but deliberate. "I know about your rent troubles. I know you're scraping by, and I'm offering you a way out." My mouth went dry. "What kind of way?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I need someone discreet. Someone I can trust. You'd spend time with me. Keep me company. In return, I'd take care of your rent. Clear your debt. Maybe even set you up with enough to start fresh. No strings, no questions." The words hit like a punch. I knew what he meant, even if he dressed it up in euphemisms. My stomach churned, but I couldn't look away from his eyes, calm, confident, like he already knew I'd say yes. I don't, I stammered, searching for an out. "Think about it," he said, cutting me off. "You're smart, Sam. You know what happens if you don't pay Graves. Eviction, no references. No way to climb out of that hole. I'm offering you a lifeline." I wanted to scream that this wasn't a lifeline, it was a noose. But the truth was, I was desperate. The eviction notice was real. The empty fridge was real. The fear that I'd end up on the street, or worse, crawling back to my parents in defeat, was real. I swallowed hard, my voice barely audible. "I need to think about it." "Of course," he said, leaning back with a nod. "Take a day. But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't last." I didn't sleep that night. I paced my apartment, the eviction notice glaring at me from the counter. I thought about calling my sister, Lena, but she was struggling enough with her own kids. I thought about quitting the cafe, finding a new job, but the market was brutal and I'd been looking for months. Every option led back to the same dead end. By morning, I was exhausted, my resolve crumbling under the weight of reality. I texted Victor, "I'll do it." Once. That's it. His reply was immediate. Tonight. 8 p.m. The second visit to his penthouse was worse. The view was the same, the apartment just as pristine, but the air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me. Victor was waiting, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his smile softer but no less predatory. "You're doing the right thing," he said as I sat on the couch, my body rigid. "This doesn't have to be a big deal, just let it happen." I wanted to argue, to tell him this was wrong, that I wasn't some transaction, but the words wouldn't come. His hand rested on my knee, warm and steady, and my body betrayed me, frozen in place. "Relax," he murmured, leaning closer. "You're in control." I wasn't, not even close. What happened next was a blur, a series of moments I tried to detach from, to bury deep inside where I wouldn't have to face them. His touch, his voice, the way he guided me like I was a project to be completed. I closed my eyes and let my mind drift to anywhere else. The cafe, the ocean, the life I used to dream of. When it was over, he handed me an envelope thick with cash. "For your rent," he said as if it was nothing. "And a little extra. You earned it." I left without a word, the envelope burning a hole in my pocket. The elevator ride down felt like falling. Back in my apartment, I scrubbed myself raw in the shower, trying to wash away the night. but the shame clung to me, thicker than the city's humidity. The envelope sat on my kitchen table, unopened for days. $2,000, enough to pay Graves, enough to buy me time. But every time I looked at it, I felt sick. I paid the rent. I had no choice. Graves took the cash without a thank you, just a grunt and a new lease agreement. But the victory felt hollow. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and the worst part was the tiny voice in my head whispering that it hadn't been that bad, that I could do it again if I had to. I hated that voice. I hated myself for listening. Victor texted a week later, "Doing okay? My offer's still open if you need more help." I stared at the message until the screen went black, my hands shaking. I didn't reply. I couldn't. But the temptation was there, a shadow I couldn't outrun. I threw myself into survival mode. I signed up for every gig app I could find. Food delivery, task services, even dog walking in the brutal summer heat. I took on double shifts at the cafe, smiling through the exhaustion. I cold-called temp agencies, begged old design clients for freelance work, anything to keep me from sinking again. It wasn't enough, not really, but it was something. A tether to the person I wanted to be. The envelope from Victor stayed on my table, untouched after the rent was paid. I couldn't bring myself to spend the extra. It felt tainted, like it would poison anything I touched. Some nights I'd sit on my fire escape, staring at the city lights and wonder if I'd ever feel clean again. The shame was a weight I carried everywhere, but I refused to let it define me. Months passed, each one a battle. I was scraping by barely, but I was free of Victor. I hadn't seen him at the cafe since that night, and I prayed he'd found someone else to prey on. Then, one October evening, everything changed. I was closing the cafe, counting tips in the back, when a man approached me. He was in his 60s, with a weathered face and a kind smile that reminded me of my grandfather. "You're Sam, right?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm Tom. I own the auto shop down the street." I nodded, wary but curious. "Yeah, that's me. I've seen you hustling," he said. "Always here, always moving. My shop's short-staffed and we need site." "I've seen you hustling," he said. "Always here, always moving. My shop's short-staffed and we need someone reliable for the front desk. Scheduling invoices, keeping things organized. It's not fancy, but it's steady. Pays decent, comes with benefits. You interested?" My heart leapt. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "I mean, yes. I'd love to hear more." He grinned, pulling a business card from his pocket. "Call me tomorrow. We'll set up a proper interview. My wife says you're a good kid. I trust her judgment." I took the card, my hands trembling. "Thank you, Tom. Really." The interview was nerve-wracking, but I poured everything into it. I wore my only clean button-down, practiced answers until my voice was hoarse, and walked into that shop like I belonged there. Tom and his wife Marilyn asked about my experience, my goals, my ability to handle chaos. I was honest about the hustle, the struggle, but not the darkest parts. By the end of the week, they called. I got the job. It wasn't a dream. The pay was $18 an hour, enough to cover rent and start chipping away at my debt. The work was mundane, answering phones, filing paperwork, dealing with grumpy customers, but it was honest. It was mine. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. A year later, I'm still at the shop. I've paid off most of my debt, moved to a slightly bigger apartment, and even started taking night classes for graphic design again. The memory of Victor hasn't vanished. It never will. Some nights it creeps back, a shadow in the corner of my mind. But it doesn't control me anymore. I burned the envelope, the business card, every trace of him I could find. I rebuilt myself piece by piece on my own terms. I still see Tom and Marilyn at the cafe sometimes. They've become like family, checking in, offering advice, celebrating my small victories. They don't know the full story, and I'll never tell them. Some burdens are mine alone. So here's my question to you. Was I wrong to do what I did with Victor? Was it survival, or did I sell a piece of myself I can't get back? I don't know if I had a choice, not really, but I wonder what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have taken the deal? Walked away? Found another way? I still carry guilt, but I also carry pride, for fighting, for clawing my way out, for choosing myself in the end. Tell me your thoughts. Maybe your perspective can help me make peace with the man I was. and the man I'm becoming. This version introduces Sam, a barista grappling with eviction, and Victor, a wealthy but manipulative figure. The setting shifts to the fictional Port Haven, with new supporting characters like Tom and Marilyn, and an expanded timeline to show Sam's struggle and recovery. The story delves deeper into his internal conflict, the mechanics of his survival, and the slow process of reclaiming his dignity. Let me know if you'd like further tweaks or a different angle.